and committee for the work guiding us through the process. Okay, now we are moving on in our agenda to Resolution 1233, which is requesting City Council approval of bond issues for the electric, gas, and wastewater divisions. And yes, I'm recognizing Ms. Long.
Commissioners, you may recall last spring during our 5-year plan presentation, we discussed the funding needs for fiscal year 2011. At the May board meeting, you adopted or approved the issuance of 4 sets of revenue bonds for each of our utility divisions to fund capital expenditures. Subsequent to the adoption of those resolutions, our bond council advised us that municipalities that are issuing Build America bonds are now including an additional redemption provision in their bond resolutions. And so upon that advisement, we studied it, we discussed it fully with bond council, and we do feel that it is prudent to include that in our resolutions. And that is really the subject of Resolution 1233 that's brought before the board for your consideration today. Real briefly, as a reminder, specifically what the board authorized back in May was up to $137 million in revenue bonds. That covered all 4 divisions. For wastewater, it was $80 million, electric $30 million, water $15 million, and gas $12 million. At this time, we are expecting to sell the electric, wastewater, and gas bonds prior to the end of this calendar year. However, we've, based upon our revised water division cash flow forecast, we will not need the water bond proceeds until the summer of 2011. Therefore, we are going to defer and push back the water bond sale into the spring. So we'll be bringing a resolution back to your consideration sometime in early 2011 for that. And an important point is that the resolutions you adopted back in May allowed for the bonds to be sold either as federally tax-exempt bonds or federally taxable Build America bonds. And that's a key point because that's what's really driving the desire to have that additional redemption provision. Just a brief summary on the Build America Bond Program. I know we've talked about this before. It was a key element of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009, and that it opened up a new funding alternatives for state and local governments as an alternative to traditional tax-exempt bonds. At that time, there was a lot of liquidity issues, lack of liquidity in the tax-exempt market, especially longer-term bonds. So Build America bonds came out as a way to address that. And the way those work is that the issuer sells them as federally taxable bonds, and the federal government, for each interest payment date, will provide the issuer with a 35% discount or rebate on the interest payment. And due to the level of that rebate, for many issuers, it's proven to be a more economic alternative as compared to tax-exempt bonds. They've been very popular since they first came out in April of 2009. Over $125 billion in Build America bonds have been sold. And KUB actually did one ourselves back in January of this year when we sold $30 million in wastewater bonds. Those were Build America bonds. And we realized a significant savings compared to a traditional tax-exempt debt, about $3 million on a present value basis. So again, they are very attractive because of that level of the discount. Now the program is sort of running out of time. When the law was passed in 2009, it said those bonds could be issued up to January 1st of 2011. So there's about 2.5 months left. Right now, there's been a lot of debate in Congress, I guess over the last several months, about extending the program, maybe extending it at a lower discount than 35%, but nothing has happened as of yet. And we really don't know if there is going to be an extension of the program in some form. So we are anticipating really probably a sort of a mad rush to the market here in the next couple of months, and a lot of issuers, a lot of state and locals wanting to sell BABs. Really the subject of the resolution, though, is the additional redemption provision. I'll just take a second and tell you that any of our bond issues that we've done over the years, or any state and local government, typically have a call provision in them that allows for the bonds to be redeemed prior to their maturity. Typically, that's about 10 years after the initial date of the bonds, and that's been the case for ours. For example, in the resolutions you adopted last May, it would allow for us to redeem those bonds early as of 2021, basically a 10-year call provision. But with the Build America bonds, and what our bond counsel advised us about is that to as far as what's called an extraordinary redemption provision, which would allow the issuer to redeem the bonds anytime up to that 10-year period or based upon an extraordinary event. And that extraordinary event would be that the federal government reduced or eliminated, for some reason, that 35% rebate.
Okay, but I thought that that's the whole reason people do this is because that isn't. So you're saying you're counting on the federal government not to follow through. Is that what this is?
It is a means of protecting the issuer in the event over the long term if the federal government did decide to go back retroactively and say, we can't support that 35% level rebate anymore, it's going to be reduced to 15% or it's going to be eliminated altogether. It's giving those issuers protection then to go ahead and redeem those bonds and replace them if the economics prove beneficial with tax exempt debt. So, and from the bondholder perspective, the way the provision is written, the bondholders are actually going to be kept whole because if indeed that did occur and we did redeem the bonds under that provision, we pay them the present value of the payments they would have received to the optional redemption date. So basically the bondholders would be kept whole. As a result, there's not any additional premiums or really differences in the purchase price of having that provision in there. It just allows us to do it quicker if need be.
Who's paying the bondholders if they back out of this? All right, let's say this institution, not this institution, the bank buys a bond for a pension plan, okay, and they're thinking they're going to be getting their 4 or 5% or whatever it is, but then all of a sudden you want out because the government is not going to give you your 35%. So this institution is still going to get its guaranteed 4 to 5% or 10%?
The institution is going to be paid by KUB what we owe that. And what we would be paying them is really the present value of what we would have paid them if we would redeem the bonds at that 2021 period.
Not interest.
We're not paying interest.
Okay. That's what I was trying to
But they're getting, again, the present value of what we would have paid them at that point in time.
Mark,
So
when you
there'd
did the
be-
wastewater bonds, did it have its provisions?
It did not, sir.
And,
No.
and what was the cost on those bonds? I mean,
The cost-
what are we paying on those?
What we're paying on those is on average 4.15. And those
if
are
we don't
30-plus
do
year
that,
debt.
if we don't do this resolution, what can we expect the market reaction to be cost-wise?
If we did not adopt this, it is not going to change the price of the bonds.
So, I mean,
But it does give us that additional, we're not going to pay more for having that provision in this bond resolution. It's not going to cost us anything in addition.
If I'm understanding is, if the federal government says they're just kidding.
Right.
And then the bondholder can exercise a right to redeem the bond at that time.
We would be the one exercising the rights, sir. As the issuer, we're the ones that would be calling the bonds.
Right.
Because then our cost has gone up 3.5% over what our current cost of debt would be, our issuance cost of debt.
So the federal government is going to pay us the 35%.
Yes, the federal government right now, I'm sorry, is paying us that 35%. And if they quit paying us that, then our cost of debt goes up.
All right, for some reason I thought it was the buyer, that the buyer of the bond got the tax break.
And
That's
we're
what we are
simply,
getting.
we're simply protecting ourselves.
That is
from
correct.
the possibility
Okay,
of that would happen.
That's right. That's just an insurance provision to give us, in the event that happens. Hopefully that's a very, very low probability that that
So
would happen.
this resolution would cover the bonds we issued last year that were Build America.
I'm sorry.
It doesn't.
Now, those do not have that provision because we have already sold those bonds. This would cover the bonds that we're getting ready to sell here in the next several months.
So last year's issue, just tough luck if the government backed out on it.
That would be correct. Now, if again, probably a very low probability that's going to happen, but then for that 9-year period, basically, yes, you would have that exposure.
I guess you're saying you're going to be able, you would redeem the bond, but these bonds, if you're taking a 60% debt, you're going to be able to, I guess you're going to try and issue another bond, redeem that bond?
That is correct. That is how you would pay the bondholders. You would basically, issue tax exempt debt in this situation to be
Yeah.
able to pay off those bondholders, and then you would have new bondholders with tax exempt debt.
I don't think so.
But this is just till the end of the year anyway. But going forward, we'll have that in there when we can do that.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes, this would apply, even though the ability to issue these bonds probably after the first of the year may well be non-existent. We'll still have this protection for any bonds issued up until then. And so, Commissioners, real quickly, Resolution 1233 does adopt new bond resolutions for electric, gas, and wastewater. And again, water will come back to the board in the spring, so that's not included among these resolutions. And it does rescind the authority that you granted last May, just replaces it with new resolutions for that. And if approved today, we do anticipate going to City Council very quickly, probably first week of November, and then selling the bonds around mid to late November.
If the government continues the program with slightly different language, will this resolution apply, or will we have to have something different?
This resolution would still apply for the bonds that we would sell to this day. Any future bond issues would have their own resolutions, and we might have to change the language in there depending on the program. Yes, sir.
Other questions? Comments from the public or input on this resolution?
Move for approval of resolution 1233.
A motion and a second. This will be the first and final reading. Excuse me, I haven't had it all. Okay, Coley, I guess we're ready for a roll call.
Commissioner Anderson.
Aye.
Commissioner Canal.
Aye.
Commissioner Jones.
Aye.
Commissioner Robinson. Commissioner Simmons.
Aye.
Mr. Thompson.
Aye.
Commissioner Williams. Resolution 1233 passes.